Since its inception in 1958, NASA has captivated the world with its remarkable achievements in space exploration.
Ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
We choose to go to the moon before this decade is out.
However, hidden beneath the facade of groundbreaking discoveries and historic moon landings lies a persistent mystery, an enigma that has fueled skepticism and conspiracy theories.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Delving into the depths of history and examining intriguing incidents and statements, we find ourselves compelled to question the veracity of NASA's claims regarding the original moon landing and the vast expanse of space. Here we will explore NASA's history, their questionable early connections, strange interviews and life sets done in space, where things just don't exactly add up. As always, please like and subscribe, and share our videos as it helps out our channel tremendously. Now, before we dig into the questionable things about NASA, I believe it is important to give a quick summary on their creation and why we even went to the moon in the first place. Also, check out our exclusive documentaries on Patreon. We've just uploaded a new series that we cannot talk about here on YouTube, as we've uploaded a trailer to it on YouTube and that has already been taken down. And we've already had another short taken down off of TikTok for quote-unquote misinformation. So if you would like to check that out and get deeper into this rabbit hole, then go check out our Patreon. Born in the wake of the Soviet Union's remarkable launch of Sputnik in 1957, the United States found itself embroiled in a fierce space race that would captivate the world for decades to come. This competition emerged against the backdrop of the Cold War, a global clash between capitalism and communism, transforming into a relentless struggle for dominance in the realm of space exploration. For nearly 50 years, the space race unleashed an extraordinary series of clashes, technological leaps, and diplomatic maneuvers, expanding the frontiers of human capability far beyond Earth's gravity. It began with the Soviet Union's historic launch of the first man-made satellite, Sputnik, on October 4th of 1957. The implications of this feat left Americans in awe and stirred fears of falling behind in the race for aerospace supremacy. The Soviets wouldn't stop there though, as in the next month on November 3rd of 1957, but this time they would send a dog named Laika into outer space as well, which gave the Soviets the title of being the first nation in the history of mankind to ever send a living organism into outer space. Thus began an intense rivalry where both nations vied to develop groundbreaking aerospace technologies, including artificial satellites, unmanned probes, and human spaceflight. On July 29th of 1958, President Dwight D. Eisenhower sealed the United States' commitment to this cosmic pursuit by signing the National Aeronautics and Space Act, giving birth to what we know as NASA. Its inauguration on October 1st of 1958 marked the beginning of a new era, guided by the visionary leadership of figures like Hugh Dryden and Robert Gilroot. Together they would steer the Space Task Group and Mercury program, ultimately laying the groundwork for the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. A few months later, on December 18th, the United States would launch the world's first communications satellite. It captured the world's attention when President Dwight D. Eisenhower would broadcast to the world globally with a pre-recorded Christmas message. This accomplishment marked the US becoming the first broadcast of a human voice from outer space. The Americans would even soar to new heights with the world's first weather satellite, capturing the first images of Earth from the depths of space. Not to be outdone though, the Soviets swiftly retaliated with a series of awe-inspiring accomplishments. They would unleash Luna 2, a spacecraft that was the first to touch the moon's surface.
Soviet Russia scores a dramatic victory in the exploration of space with the launching of the first rocket to hit the moon.
marking a monumental milestone in space exploration. Undeterred by the vastness of the cosmos, the Soviets pushed further boundaries by launching Luna 3, successfully maneuvering an object into orbit around the moon and unveiling the far side of it through the use of photographs. They also achieved another historic feat by embarking on the daring mission Sputnik 5, transporting the first living creatures from space back to Earth safely. And an incredible display of scientific prowess, 2 dogs named Belka and Strekla, along with a diverse range of plants, returned safely, leaving an undeniable mark on space history. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the United States proudly ventured into space with Ham, a chimpanzee. Ham became the first hominid, or great ape, to venture into the cosmos and successfully survive the daring escape back to Earth. But as tensions mounted, the Soviets once again stunned the US with another remarkable achievement. On April 12th of 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first man to venture into outer space, orbiting the Earth in less than 2 hours. Worries would spread far across America, raising concerns that the Soviets possessed superior technology. In response, the United States sent Alan Shepard into space a few weeks later, although he did not achieve orbit. With the Soviets leading the space race, President Kennedy boldly declared the audacious goal of landing American astronauts on the moon before anybody else. It was a dream shared by their Soviet counterparts. A gripping back and forth would ensue, as both nations achieved remarkable milestones. John Glenn orbited the Earth for the United States in 1962, while for the Soviets, they would send the first woman to space and pioneered the first spacewalk in human history. In February of 1966, the Soviets edged closer to lunar conquest by successfully landing an unmanned spacecraft on the moon. Victory would appear within their grasp, but the United States would stage an unlikely comeback. On July 20th of 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin would defy gravity's grip, setting foot on the moon's surface. The United States became the first and only country to achieve this astonishing feat, while the Soviets focused on unmanned lunar exploration and the construction of a space station. Thus, the race to the moon reached its exhilarating climax. This historic achievement marked the end of the space race and cemented NASA's place as the leading force in civilian aerospace research. Now that we know about the space race, there are some questions that I'd like to point out. It strikes me as peculiar that the Soviets seem to dominate the space race at almost every turn, yet out of the blue, we somehow surpassed their technological prowess, despite trailing behind throughout the entirety of the race. Take a look at this graph that I made to give you a better picture of just how far ahead the Soviets were than us, up until 1968. In this graph, we see that the Soviets were able to accomplish the first soft moon landing, the first successful spacewalk, first to send living organisms into space and back safely, first to send a satellite into space, and even the first to send a human being into outer space. Really, the only thing that the Americans had over the Soviets were their satellites, with them being the first to send a broadcast and weather satellite into space. But again, they weren't even the first ones to send a satellite into space. But then all of a sudden in 1968, everything flipped with the Apollo 8, and the following year we sent the first people to walk on the moon. Now, amidst the intense rivalry with the Soviets, given our battle between capitalism and communism, and our glaring inferiority in the space race, one cannot overlook the distinct incentive for the US to fabricate the moon landing. The backdrop of this fierce competition raises suspicions, and adds weight to the notion that we might really resort to such measures. Moreover, no other nation has ever been successful in conducting crewed missions to the moon, even today, which raises further doubts in my mind. It undeniably appears curious to me, although a mere 3-year gap could account for such a shift. While it remains entirely plausible, there's an air of intrigue surrounding these circumstances, yet I must emphasize that these are merely personal opinions and observations, albeit with a lingering sense that there might be more to this narrative than meets the eye. To my surprise, it was Reuters of all places that I learned that the cherished footage of the original moon landing is nothing more than a re-recording. Now let's go through this article carefully. It begins with a startling admission made by NASA in 2006, a confession that would rock the foundations of space history. NASA would admit that nobody could find the original video recordings of the July 20th, 1969 landing. In the quest to find this lost footage, an engineer named Richard Nasser, stationed at the NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland, sets out on a mission to locate the original recordings. But his search takes an unexpected turn. Nasser stumbles upon the lost tapes, but here's where it gets strange. He finds them in a batch of 200,000 tapes, which, mind you, have been unceremoniously degaussed or magnetically erased, which means that they scrapped the old footage for parts and sold those parts. I understand cutting costs, but I have a really hard time believing that nobody thought it was a good idea to preserve the original moon landing footage, where it was the first time ever recorded in human history that we went on the moon. The carelessness over the footage has me questioning this. After this, we then learned from The Guardian that the original footage was buried over an estimated 350,000 that were recycled in the 70s and 80s, and that the data was lost forever. We also learned that they took footage from CBS archives, but it wasn't the original footage either, but copies of the original footage. So basically what this all means is that the footage we have of the original moon landing footage is a re-recording of a copy of the original footage. This is what we are all watching when we see the original moon landing. Sure, there's nothing to prove undoubtedly with this, but I believe it is at least a reason to question it, especially the carelessness over the original footage. The next thing that I found intriguing in my search of this was the following question. I know when we went to the moon the first time, but when was the last time we went back to it? And the answer I would find was puzzling to say the least. According to the Kennedy Space Center, the last mission to the moon was Apollo 17, which launched on December 7th of 1972 and returned to Earth on December 19th of 1972. Now personally, I have a question on why we haven't been back to the moon since 1972, especially since many people believe that it was a hoax. Couldn't NASA been able to settle the debate in the last 50 years? Well, according to official sources, these are some of the reasons as to why we haven't been back. One reason is that the factories that assembled the vehicles were retasked or shut down, and that the jigs and molds were destroyed. Another reason is that the technicians, engineers, scientists, and flight controllers moved on to other jobs. NASA astronaut Don Petit was even asked this about why we haven't gone back to the moon, and this was his response.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
Now I understand these reasons, and I don't think that they're all invalid. My problem with this is that I still find it incredibly difficult to believe that we couldn't at least save one ship, or even the blueprints, which are just papers that need to be kept in a file. I don't understand why this is such an impossible task to accomplish. So to recap again, we don't have the original footage because we scrapped it for money, only re-recordings from copies, and we also don't have the technology anymore to replicate going back to the moon because we destroyed it. And this is all confirmed by NASA themselves. Again, nothing conclusive yet, but there is enough here to at least have questions on what is really going on. What's next in store for the video though? Will I be questioning everything that you were taught in schools? Please be aware that what's next will challenge your preconceived notions on what you were taught growing up. So please go into this with an open mind as much as you can, because where we're going is nothing short of an illusion. According to NASA, Buzz Aldrin is an American former astronaut, engineer, and fighter pilot. He was born on January 20th, 1930, in Glen Ridge, New Jersey, United States. We learned that he made 3 spacewalks as a pilot of the 1966 Gemini 12 mission, and was the Lunar Module Eagle pilot on the 1969 Apollo 11 mission, becoming the second person to walk on the moon after mission commander Neil Armstrong. Where this gets strange though, is when he went on a couple of interviews and said some things that you wouldn't expect the second man to ever walk the moon say. In this first interview, we see him with a little girl and she questions him on why we haven't been back to the moon. His answer is nothing short of perplexing.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't happen, so in the future, if we want to keep doing something, we need to know why something stopped in the past that we wanted to keep it going.
In 2000, we would also see Buzz Aldrin on Conan O'Brien's show, where again he states that we never went.
Let's talk about this, because this is fascinating. I remember very clearly, I think anybody who was alive at the time does, I remember my parents waking me up and we went down and we watched you guys land on the moon.
No, you didn't.
What?
Because there wasn't any television. There wasn't anybody taking a picture. You watched animation. See, you associated what you saw with...
I have very hazy memories.
I know.
According to Reuters, on Conan O'Brien interview, I'm taking it out of context because, according to them, he was referring to animations used by broadcasters at the time and their coverage of the moon landing, intercut with real footage. The moon landing did take place and men did walk on the moon. Now, he is referring to animations, but to be more exact, he is telling Conan that the original footage he and everyone else saw was not the original footage, but was just a recreated animation of the original footage. So up to this point, if we take the information that we already learned with the original moon landing footage and add in this new info, what we learn is that the moon landing footage we have today is a recreated animation of a copy of a re-recording of the original footage. Another thing I would like you guys to remember, with fact checkers like Reuters for example, is just who exactly owns these fact-checking websites. In the case of Reuters for example, it is Thomson Reuters Corporation as the owner, and they are owned by a combination of institutional investors and the Thomson family. Here are some of the major shareholders of the Thomson Reuters Corporation. And what do we see? Vanguard. In my previous BlackRock video, I explain how BlackRock and Vanguard have shares in pretty much every company in the world, and are the ones behind the ESG scores that are plaguing companies and nations worldwide. BlackRock even owns most of Vanguard themselves, so personally, I do not trust them as a reputable source of information for fact-checking. Over the years, NASA has recorded numerous live recordings of their adventures up into space. Some keen observers, though, have noticed some things that don't exactly add up. I will present to you a compilation of videos that viewers have pointed out as questionable or downright manipulative to the American public. So let us begin. Video 1. A curious stance with gravity. The first video reveals a group of 5 astronauts, seemingly floating in space, their weightlessness evident. However, a peculiar incident occurs when one of the astronauts on the right drops an inflated globe, which unexpectedly falls to the ground. This observation raises a fundamental question. How does gravity selectively affect the globe, but not the astronauts? Additionally, the actions of the astronauts on the left, attempting to catch the falling globe, appear peculiar and prompt further scrutiny. Could there be an alternative explanation for these observed behaviors? Surely they weren't using harnesses, right? Video 2. It starts with a man in a green shirt seemingly grasping an invisible object passed to him by a colleague. Furthermore, a glimpse of an individual moving swiftly through the frame, tethered to an unmistakable harness, raises questions about the authenticity of their weightless environment and confirming that they do have and use harnesses. Additional clips showcase visual effects of people disappearing, resembling the cross-dissolve feature in Adobe Premiere Pro, which is a video editing software, as well as peculiar occurrences such as the presence of bubbles in space, the repeated use of CGI, the apparent reliance on harnesses and wirefalls, leave us pondering the extent of the authenticity in these NASA productions. Moreover, the testing of equipment in pools is also strange to me, because it has me thinking, is it possible that the footage we see of them in spacesuits in space is just them in a pool, with the walls CGI'd out to make it look like they're in space? It would make sense since the water would make it appear as if gravity is different and that the astronaut was floating, and changing the background is not a difficult task to accomplish. Streamers do this every day. Sure, this is just a theory and just a stretch, but I do believe that there is something here. Video 4. A controversial spin. This video centers around a specific interaction between 2 astronauts. As the individual in the blue shirt performs a spin, it appears that the astronaut on the right discreetly grabs his harness, seemingly to hold him in place. This observation raises concerns again concerning the authenticity of the weightless environment and the use of harnesses. A growing community of individuals have united in their belief that NASA, the renowned space agency, is not as it appears. One such person is Justin Harvey, a resident of Brevard County, Florida, where NASA is located. Fueled by his convictions, Justin took it upon himself to confront his county commissioners and shed light on what he perceived as a massive fraud perpetuated by NASA. During a county commission meeting in April of 2023, Justin stood before the commissioners, determined to expose the potential deceit within NASA's operations. With unwavering resolve, he presented his case, supported by others who had also noticed the same anomalies within NASA's live footage.
My name is Justin Harvey. I live at 103 South Osceola, Orlando, 32801. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Today I'd like to bring to your attention a potential fraud on an enormous scale happening in your county. There's now clear evidence of NASA using numerous methods to grossly mislead the public about astronauts being on the International Space Station. During interior ISS scenes from NASA's own live feed, the use of wires, harnesses, green screens, and virtual reality have been detected to achieve the appearance of a weightless environment. Examples of this include astronauts fading in and out of the screen, green screen glitches, grabbing objects that aren't really there, pulling on invisible wires, getting tangled in their harnesses, and even astronauts appearing out of thin air. This begs the obvious question. If they're really up there, why are they using Hollywood techniques to fake the footage? Now, unfortunately, I can't show you these clips in here today, but I will be sending them to you. Moving on, outside the International Space Station, during spacewalks, air bubbles have been recorded on numerous occasions. How is it possible for air bubbles to be present in the vacuum of space? I once questioned astronaut Scott Kelly about this phenomenon. His body language and answers only created more questions. In 2013, astronaut Luca Parmitano nearly drowned during a spacewalk when his helmet filled with water. This happened again just last year. Air bubbles, helmets filling with water, and drowning. Are they in space or are they underwater? Now, what's really interesting is that they trained for spacewalks in an underwater pool with a complete ISS replica. Now, surely they aren't filming these spacewalks in an underwater pool and then editing them to appear if they're in space, because that sure would be something, wouldn't it? I'm calling on the Brevard County Commissioners to open a full investigation into NASA's fraudulent practices and use of taxpayer dollars. It costs NASA $3 billion per year to operate the ISS, and if they don't have a darn good explanation as to why they're faking these videos, I and the public would like a darn good explanation as to where our tax money is going. And if they are indeed faking the funk, it is our duty to expose and eliminate this fraudulent and astronomically wasteful ISS program. And look, I know what you're all thinking. The NASA is part of the federal government, and you're just county commissioners. Even if what I'm saying is true, what can you do? But let me remind you, not only is this happening in your county, as public officials, you have the platform and the ability to make a statement or hold a press conference, alerting the public, state, and federal authorities to investigate further. You have the power to start the conversation. Video evidence of everything I described today will be emailed to you all, and I truly hope we can get to the bottom of this. I look forward to the day that $3 billion annual budget is put towards our veterans, our homeless, maybe some of that mental health stuff the young lady just spoke about, and the revitalization of Brevard County. Thank you for your time today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir.
Justin meticulously detailed the observations that had raised suspicions among many. He highlighted the presence of wires, harnesses, green screens, and virtual reality elements, all of which have been detected to create the illusion of weightlessness. He recounted the instances of astronauts fading in and out of the screen, glitches with the green screens, interactions with objects that seemingly weren't there, and even astronauts appearing seemingly out of thin air. These peculiar occurrences led Justin to question the authenticity of the footage. Furthermore, he revealed additional perplexing instances during spacewalks outside the ISS.
So many times during spacewalks outside the International Space Station, we can see air bubbles rising up. Can you touch on how there are air bubbles in space?
Can you be more specific? Air bubbles?
So yeah, like a lot of times during the footage, the NASA footage, you can see bubbles coming up out of the helmets or kind of from underneath you. How do you explain bubbles in space?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about. Now sometimes you get water in the helmet, and it's either from sweat or from the cooling garments. And on some of my spacewalks, I had like water in the helmet, not like I was going to drown in the helmet, but just little bits of water probably came from sweat.
where air bubbles have been recorded in the supposed vacuum of space. He highlighted the alarming incident involving astronaut Luca Parmenino in 2013, when his helmet filled with water during a spacewalk. To Justin, these occurrences raised doubts about the authenticity of NASA's activities. He posed the question of whether the astronauts were truly in space, or if they were operating in an underwater environment. He referenced the fact that the astronauts undergo spacewalk training in an underwater pool replicating the ISS, leading to the disconcerting possibility that NASA may be filming these supposed spacewalks underwater and subsequently editing them to appear as if they occurred in space. The ISS, for those who don't know, is the International Space Station, a large spacecraft in orbit around the Earth and is the largest modular space station in low Earth orbit. It is a cooperative program between 5 space agencies: NASA, Roscosmos, JAXA, ESA, and CSA. Back to Justin though, because he didn't stop there. He has also questioned other astronauts personally on these anomalies to get answers from the source. Here we see him question the retired astronaut Anna Fisher about the use of harnesses in underwater spacewalks.
A question though, sometimes when we're watching the ISS footage, you'll see the astronauts sometimes connected to like wires and harnesses. Is that to keep them like in the frame during the broadcast, or what's the reason for that?
No, I haven't actually. You mean while they're inside the shuttle?
Yeah, like when they're inside the ISS, sometimes during the feeds, the broadcast, you'll see kind of pulling on their belts or something like that.
I bet that is. I have not personally seen that.
Oh, really?
But I know that they try to be still when they're doing talking to someone, and then they usually try to release and do like a flip at the end or something like that.
Because I've seen the flip before, and it almost looked like a foot was caught like inside something, but there was nothing really there. It was really strange. I didn't know if there was something to kind of like hold them in place or something.
We never had anything like that, but they may have learned over time that it was hard to stay still, and they may have come up with something.
Did you ever think the public would find out that all the spacewalks were filmed underwater? Did you have any comment on that?
Well, we train underwater.
Oh, okay, but only training?
Only training.
Okay.
The video also goes on to show us that the ISS has an exact replica in Houston. It is a neutral buoyancy laboratory located at the Sonny Carter Training Facility near the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. The NBL, according to NASA, is an underwater training facility used to prepare astronauts for the zero-gravity conditions that they'll experience in space. The narrator has the same exact concern as Justin, that there is no ISS space station in outer space orbiting our Earth, but that there is only one which resides in Houston, Texas. She states that all the live footage we see of it being shot here on Earth, and that the process goes like this: shoot your footage underwater, remove the water layer through editing, add in CGI Earth layer to remove the backdrop, and now you went from a pool into outer space. Back to Justin though, he would even go on to question Scott Kelly on why there was footage of air bubbles in space, but his answer was that his helmet got water in it, but that he never saw bubbles in space. Justin would then get mocked by the entire crowd just because he told them to look up bubbles in space.
Could it be that you're filming in an underwater pool and you're not really out there?
As we delved into the depths of NASA's history and examined the puzzling incidents and statements surrounding their space missions, a disturbing pattern emerged. The evidence we presented raises legitimate questions about the veracity of NASA's claims and the true nature of their accomplishments. While it is important to approach these questions with a skeptical mind, the inconsistencies and revelations we have explored cannot be easily dismissed. One of the most troubling revelations is the absence of the original moon landing footage. NASA's own admission says that they cannot locate the original moon landing footage, and this raises suspicion. The fact that the tapes were degaussed and sold for parts suggests a careless disregard for preserving such a monumentous event in human history. The recreated animated footage of re-recordings of copies that we now have as the only evidence of the moon landing leave room for doubt and call into question the authenticity of the entire event. Another perplexing aspect is the absence of further moon missions since 1972. While official sources attribute this to factors like the dismantling of facilities and the dispersal of personnel, it is hard to comprehend why essential artifacts and technology were not preserved for future exploration or even historical monuments. The statements of astronaut Don Petit acknowledging the lack of technology to return to the moon and stating that we even destroyed that technology add even more fuel to the fire of skepticism. Perhaps the most astonishing revelation comes from Buzz Aldrin, the second man to ever set foot on the moon. In interviews, he makes cryptic statements that cast doubt on the authenticity of the moon landing. While some may dismiss these statements as taken out of context, we should question the motives of these fact-checkers and the ownership of the sources they represent. The influence of powerful entities raises concerns that the independence and objectivity of the information provided. In addition, vigilant viewers have taken it upon themselves to closely analyze NASA's live television broadcasts and have successfully identified various peculiar incidents and inconsistencies. These include the detection of wires, harnesses, virtual reality elements, all of which were utilized to create the illusion of weightlessness. Notably, astronauts have been observed fading in and out of the screen, interactions with objects that appeared to be non-existent, and even instances of astronauts seemingly materializing out of thin air. These videos have sparked valid concerns regarding the authenticity of the weightlessness environment depicted in NASA's broadcasts. The presence of harnesses and other anomalous elements further undermines the trust in NASA's television representations. In conclusion, the evidence presented in this exploration of NASA's history and actions suggest a potential dark side to this agency's narrative. While we cannot draw definitive conclusions without concrete evidence, the inconsistencies, omissions, and puzzling statements cast doubt on the official version of events. It is imperative to approach the subject with an open mind and continue questioning the actions and motives of organizations like NASA. Only through critical thinking and a pursuit of the truth can we uncover the full story behind humanity's ventures into space. And as always, friends, keep your eyes open.